What is up, everybody? Good morning. Good morning. It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, and 2018 Innovation Award winner. And I am the host, as officially it launches today, the Dad Central Show, which is the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Doveman Plus Care and also sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. I should say I'm the co-host and co-producer. So you know what? Before we leave, I will share the link for it. We have the first episode premiering today with former NHL star Trevor Linden. And then on Monday, we have Donovan Bennett of Sportsnet. Canada's now one of the two national sports networks in Canada. And I'll just share that link before we leave today. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And if you have any experience enjoying the morning vibe, you'll notice that my cohort, Ryan Knight, is not here. Well, the reason why Ryan Knight is not here is his organization, the ACBN, Afro-Caribbean Business Network, is in the midst of the last day of their Federal Black Entrepreneur Ecosystem Conference, which is bringing together a whole bunch of ecosystem partners, Black ecosystem partners, and they're getting together, workshops, discussion, panels, etc. I was there yesterday on a panel talking about business and the arts. So Ryan is not with us today, so that's why he is not with us today. And hope everyone's having an outstanding week here in Toronto, where I'm based. We've lost a little bit of humidity, but beautiful weather outside today, and looking forward to a great Father's Day weekend. So just want to say it in the front end, and I'll say it on the back end, that happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, whether they're with us or not, and all the caregivers who are acting as fathers, stepdads, bonus dads, etc. We love you, respect you, we honor you. So just want to put that out there. And let's get to it. It has been quite a week in Canadian socio-economic news, especially in regards to a report that was released by the Toronto Police Force about something that many of us already knew, that the police are not treating Black and Indigenous people fairly when it comes to encounters with the police and those groups. We're going to get to that in a second, but bringing back a longtime friend, mentor with us today to share about gun violence and also talk about the police report. So bringing back, he has been with us before in the morning, hasn't been with us in a bit, Louis Marsh, founder of the Zero Gun Violence Movement. There he is. Good morning, Dr. Marsh. How are you?
If you call me doctor, if you're misleading the public, instead of student of life.
I'm giving you a doctorate from the Dr. Vibe University.
Oh, I see. Okay, then. Okay. Then I graciously accept that,
Good stuff. How are you doing this morning?
Still standing, still fighting. The weather is fine. Yes. And looking forward to another active day.
As always.
Serving our community.
Absolutely. And, I've never asked this live with you before. Where did the impetus start? Where did it first start serving our community? Where did that start?
I think it's my relationship with Dudley Laws, the executive director of the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the 1970s. They set up a youth wing to the UNIA called BICAP, Black Youth Community Action Project. And it was young people working in the community uh, in defense of the injustices that were taking place, mainly police brutality. And this was in the 1970s. And I've worked with Dudley for many years. In fact, he showed up at our wedding. He was invited to our wedding
Nice.
30 something years ago. And I've worked with those people from BICAP still. So working with young people from the 1970s, the issue has changed over time, to focus on gun violence. But the
Hmm.
police brutality issue has always been a major concern. And we have the historical context. And we're not letting it go.
Absolutely. So that I'm just putting this in perspective, everyone who's watching this live or watching on replay. Louis has been doing heart work 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010, 2020. That's 6 decades, folks. Just want you to see my hands. 6 decades. So actually some people saying Kofi Morris is saying big up Elder Lewis.
Elder Louis.
Louis. So some people know who you is. Let's let's get a little background in regards to how did the zero gun violence movement start?
The Zero Gun Violence movement started in 2013. Uh, After the shooting we had in the Eaton Center, the public shooting in the food court, and also the shooting in Danzig at the community barbecue, where people were shot in public at public events. As I said, my initial work was with police brutality. My profession is I'm a corporate manager, and my department got outsourced to India, and I got a very generous severance package, and I decided to go focus on my real passion. So at that time, I called a community meeting with about 7 community organizations and said, our fight has always been about against police brutality. What's going on where we're pointing the guns at ourselves? And I said, what would it take to get to zero gun violence in the city of Toronto? And a lot of people thought it was a joke, it was impossible, and it was a dream. And I said, no, because we already have zero gun violence in our city. But it's only in certain neighborhoods for certain people. So if they can have zero gun violence in Rosedale, why can't we have zero gun violence in Rexdale? If they can have zero gun violence in Hyde Park, why can't we have zero gun violence in Regent Park?
Mm-hmm.
And people seem to accept that status quo. And I said, no. I said, hell no. We need to close the gap. And our life expectancy, our quality of life should not be dependent on our postal code. So we started off with
Mm.
seven community organizations. We launched that Redemption Reintegration Services, which was at Midland and Lawrence. And we started off imagine this, as a 90-day summer campaign. We figured we'd get into all these communities, solve the problem of gun violence in 90 days, and everybody would be happy. It started out as a 90-day summer campaign. And 9 years later, we're still at it. But we've moved from 7 community organizations to over 40 now, a very broad and wide network across the city. And as we peel layer and layer away, we find out how deep this problem is. So yeah, starting off as a 90-day summer campaign, Redemption Reintegration Services at Midland and Lawrence,
Yeah.
and 9 years later, we're still at this.
Mm. Let me ask, what were the early days like?
It was more about awareness. The magnitude and the depth of the problem wasn't something that I'd really realized at that time. And then as we started peeling away the layers, it became more frustrating because it was like one step forward, two steps backwards. Then you realize the complexity, the difficulty, and also what was frustrating was the fact that people seemed to just accept the status quo, what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't really think it was in their power to do something about it. And that neglect or that denial of the problem caused it to grow even bigger. So those were the initial days. It was also working with the mothers who had lost children to gun violence, their daily hurt, pain, agony, trauma, and grief, and the fact that they had personal losses, but they still wanted to organize and help other people prevent these type of situations from happening. And it's also working with the people that were involved in the violence, people who had done the crime, done the time, and wanted to make a difference. So I said, look, if these people can put everything out there trying to make a difference, that was a challenge to me. How much am I willing to invest in this? So it was frustrating, definitely at that time, because I was beginning to see how deep this problem went and the responsibilities, the neglect, the denials, and that sort of worked in my favor because I was not going to back down. So that was the initial days, yeah.
Yeah. So just to reset here, it's the morning vibe here with Dr. Vibe. Ryan Knight is not with us today. I am learning, sharing, and we're getting wisdom from Louis Marsh of the Zero Gun Violence Movement. Louis, one of the reasons I brought you on today is we, over the last number of weeks and months, we've heard lots about gun violence in the United States, gun violence in the United States. Last I checked, you and I live in Canada. Isn't gun violence an issue here? And why isn't it not being talked about and acted upon more here?
That's a good question because we just did an interview with some people from Buffalo. They sent in a reporting team to Toronto to speak to Zero Gun Violence Movement about the differences or the similarities and so on. Uh, it's a big question. The shootings in the city of Toronto this year compared to last year have increased 20%. It's more than one shooting per day. The number of gun homicides this year compared to last year are up 50%. Compared to this time last year, up 50%. And nobody wants to be talking about it. They always use COVID as an excuse. But COVID has COVID now, okay? It's not big as it used to be. So people have been able to recalibrate and refocus. And the reason nobody wants to talk about it is because who does it affect the most? Who disproportionately is impacted by gun violence? It's our children, it's our communities. And that seems to be uh, a side discussion instead of a priority. And the politicians have gotten away with it because we as a community have not stepped up. Like these are our children, these are our families that are impacted by gun violence. And all these community organizations that are funded by the government have other priorities. Because when you deal with gun violence, it points to the government for lack of leadership, lack of courage, and lack of purpose to deal with this issue because it doesn't affect them. But our community has to take a stronger leadership position in finding out what's really going on and demanding and ensuring that the right policies, programs are in place to provide our children, our youth, our families with the opportunity for a good life. So why is it not on the forefront? Because we have a community have dropped the ball. Who in our community is talking about gun violence? Which organization do you know is talking about gun violence? Right? So I've tried to work with community organizations in the Black community, and we've made some progress, but not enough. The government is not going to do it, because if you're dealing with gun violence, a lot of the fingers are going to be pointed back to government policy, programs, decisions, and so on. Why would they want to do that? The onus must be on our community to make sure that this is on the front page, that this is a priority issue. How many vigils, how many memorials, how many funerals do we have to attend before we realize that it's cutting the foundation of our community under our legs? I'm not sure how many more people have to die before we wake up as a community and respond accordingly.
Elder, let me ask you, why do you think, okay, compare the journey you've taken. Why do you feel the lack of commitment from the Black community is not where it should be? Do you have any thoughts or figured out why it's not where it should be when it comes to this subject?
When it comes to the issue of gun violence, it's not a feel-good discussion. Gun violence does not happen in a vacuum. The gun violence that we're seeing today is a direct result, product of inaction and bad decisions that we made yesterday. The community organizations in Toronto, the majority of them are funded by the government. That means they're an extension of the government. They are. The government sets the program. The government sets the priority because they pay for it. So why would the government be funding programs and organizations that are going to challenge the way they operate as government? They're not going to do that. So that's why we have a problem. We have a problem because the people that we entrust to make those decisions, the right decisions in government, are not doing it. And we have a problem because our community organizations have different agendas. And we have a problem because these community organizations, because they have different agendas, have difficulty working together to have the collective impact necessary to address this problem.
I want you to look back over the journey. You know, you had long experience working with Dudley Laws and other greats. You know them better than most of us watching this live or on replay. What would they be saying to the community organizations if they had the ability to talk to them right now? What do you think a Dudley Laws would say to them?
If you look at our history, the organizations that have had the most impact in terms of social change have been organizations that work independently of the government. The Black Panther Party, UNIA, Nation of Islam. These organizations were not funded and dependent on government direction to do the work that they had to do. The UNIA, Black Panther Party, Nation of Islam, the community organizations that have had the most impact have not had a dependency relationship on government. Dudley Laws, Charles Roach, these people, Sharona Hall, they would say, look to self-determination, self-reliance, self-actualization, because there's two different agendas. One agenda serves the dominant voice, the dominant narrative, and the dominant powers. They're not going to voluntarily or participate in any initiative that erodes that relationship. These people would say, look, self determination, self reliance, self actualization is more important than building relationships with government agencies, government levels that have a vested interest in keeping us down.
Once in a while, I come up with a good question. So thank you so much. And Ray from the Good Morning Gentlemen, thank you for having this conversation. Mr. March, thank you for your work and your position. You two still have to meet, by the way. The position you have taken makes many uncomfortable, but it is the way to solutions. Also says, thank you for continuing the legacy of Dudley Laws and Charles Roach. How has, from your lens, pandemic and how has, and now we're in somewhat less post-pandemic somewhat, how has that impacted gun violence?
It has impacted gun violence in a serious way because the pandemic was actually a pause button where the services and supports for young people were put on hold. The pandemic shut down those spaces where young people used to congregate in positive activities, sometimes negative, but access to schools, access to community centers, access to McDonald's, Burger King, where people used to hang out. All those places were shut down. It was never a priority to ensure that young people had spaces to congregate. So what we saw happening is they would create their own spaces. Underground parking lots, stairways in apartment buildings, in people's apartments. So we start seeing shootings taking places in these areas because they were not supervised, they were not managed. It was a free-for-all. So those places where they used to congregate were shut down. Nobody thought that it was a priority to keep youth programming alive. So the gun violence shifted to these underground places. The services and supports were cut off. There was no interaction, and whatever interaction was there was more like tokenism. Right? Well, why don't we gather in a park? And why don't we bring hula hoops and soccer balls? People that are involved in this type of activity are not going to show up there. Come on. We know who would show up and we know who would not show up. So now we have to recalibrate and re-engage this population, the young people. And it means coordination and commitment. And it's going to take time to get to that space again. During the pandemic, everybody was thinking that gun violence numbers would decline. In fact, they didn't. The people involved in criminal activity are resourceful people. They will find a way to continue the hustle despite the pandemic. So now that the pandemic is not on the forefront the way it used to, we have to reimagine how we build, reconnect with our young people in a meaningful way, and we have to catch up for these past 2 years. So whether it's education, whether it's employment, what we've seen happening right now is an increasing amount of youth violence. So it's not only gun violence that we've seen the increase in. We've seen in attempted suicides, drug violence. When people feel left out and left behind and ignored, violence increases. So it's not only the gun violence where we've seen this violence increasing, those other areas that I've just mentioned, and we're all paying a price for it right now. And our government thinks that if they do not talk about it, it doesn't exist. They have this code of silence. Well, it's personal and it's confidential, so we shouldn't talk about it. No, you damn well need to talk about it because it is eroding the foundation of our society, in our community. It is eroding whatever progress we've made in the past, and we better double our efforts now to bring this youth population back into the spaces where they should be, because there's a lot of catching up needs to be done. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Sir, Janet's saying, sir, you are absolutely bang on. Anyone or any organization that is a receipt of government funding will be effectively silenced. The government uses money to effectively silence Black activism. Maine Campbell saying the highest rise in mental breakdowns for our youth during the pandemic, anger and rage increase, loss in social engagement, and a loss I'm in the ability to problem solve, which lead to social drama within their circles. So sad.
So it's predictable. However, the solution and how do we move forward? Who are the ones that are going to be in the leadership role here? Is it government or is it going to be community?
What, Elder, what about in the home? What is going on in the homes of these youth? You talk with them, you talk with the mothers, a lot of the mothers, you talk with the parents. What is going on in the home?
Well, I think the question is what is not going on in the home.
That, oh, either what is and what is not going on in the home, either one.
I grew up in Spanish Town in Jamaica. I had 10 mothers and 10 fathers. I don't know where the heck they all came from, but if I did something wrong, there was an accounting that would have to take place. On my best days, I might be able to dodge half of them, but they would catch up to me on Sunday at church. There was a fear of doing something wrong because I had to answer to so many people. Fast forward to today. It's a challenge even just having one mother and one father.
Yeah.
The village approach, the community approach that I grew up in doesn't exist up here. That's the way the society is built. What's in it for me? So that has changed. So what is not going on in the family is providing. Yesterday I was in a call with a young man whose son is 15 and he's incarcerated already.
What?
And I said, what was important to you? Why didn't you follow the direction of people in your community? He said, because his mother was a strong voice. He feared her, right? He feared doing wrong because there was going to be an accounting at home. There was another person on the call that said the same thing. We know when the family structure is solid and imposes family values on the children, it makes a big difference. But the family structure that we have right now, I'm not going to say you need 10 fathers and 10 mothers anymore. But that community, that village approach does not exist. So the family, mostly single parent families, are struggling just to put food on the table. And a lot of things we've entrusted others to take care of. We've put our children's life in the hands of others, and those others have not really have our children's best interests. And that is what's going on. The support systems for the families are not really support systems. In the family, you wonder, what does the family look like? For some people, you talk about family, they're talking about social media. When we talk to gang people, they say they know how to identify children that are struggling and how to recruit them into their business. So I said, well, if you can identify and recruit and provide basic needs for these children, these youth, why is it we as a society, we as family are not able to do that? And that is the challenge.
Yep.
The family, we have to reimagine it in a Western contemporary society and realize that there's many deficits that need to be addressed and compensated for. And I'm not sure if we're ready to do that.
All right, some more comments. Macmillan Group, the responsibility not only to self but to family, immediate and extended, along with community, is base cause for the breakdown we are seeing, and the results, lack of responsibility. Maine Campbell says the breakdown of the family structure. How can we teach roles without role model at home? The system has forced adults to think about survival rather than building rooted characteristics.
Like, we know what the problem is. I'm all problemed out, to be honest.
I know. We've had
But
many of those conversations.
Where are we going to be going with this? Are we ready? Because we have to roll up our sleeves. Because if you look at our history, we've always put the priority on our children and the women in the family. We protected them at all costs. You could do whatever you wanted, but don't touch my wife and don't touch my children. Today, it's open season. It's open. Who's protecting who now? Who's preserving that foundation? Who's maintaining its structure and the importance of it? The government? That in itself is a sin. That in itself is a criminal act. To entrust the government to look after our children. That is criminal. And it's frustrating to see it because we have to work with the fallout from this. We have to work with that 15-year-old that says he fears living more than he fears dying. I said, what the fuck are you talking about? You know nothing about life. You're still in diapers. He says, you don't know what I have to go through on a daily basis just to survive. And I'm saying, you're willing to give up life because of what you're going? Yes. He says, what he has to go through. A 15-year-old should not be talking that language to me. Should not be. But this didn't happen overnight. This did not happen overnight. The writing has been on the wall, and we've ignored it, and we have not responded appropriately, and now we're paying the price.
Elder, another thing that concerns me as you're sharing with us, and then thank you for being open and honest and speaking truth to power. This is a generational thing, right? This is impacting future generations, correct?
No doubt about it. As I said, we're paying the price for what we didn't do right yesterday. And the price is getting bigger and bigger these days. The gun violence, homicides this year are up 50% from what it was last year. People are dying, people are crying. And who is out there leading? Who is out there showing courage, determination, and conviction to do something about it? As I said, I'm all problemed out. All problemed out. Talk to me about solutions. How do we move forward? Because you are 100% right. This is not about today.
No, it's not.
This is about tomorrow. It's about tomorrow, and tomorrow doesn't look too good if today is as bad as it is. Okay, so we need to mobilize. We need to organize. We need to get serious. We need to find that courage, and we must step out of that individual, self-serving bubble and start looking at community as a priority.
You know, and it's interesting, and I'm gonna see if I can get this book here. I mentioned it the other day. I'm gonna mention it again. I got educated on that many years ago by this book. Black Men, Obsolete, Single, and Dangerous. The African American Family in Transition, written by Hakeem Mahabuti. Back in 1990, I bought this book. And what it brought to my eyes is that our heritage, melanated people's heritage, is based on the communal. North American, European heritage is based on the individual. So it is hard or challenging for a people who have a communal heritage to thrive in an individualistic system. And he said the only way that we can move ahead is the communal. So this is the second time I've touched this book this week. I touched it on my Friday show, Black Canada Talking, and I wanted to put up again because that's when my eyes got really wide open. It was spoke to me loudly. So
And that was 1990.
1990.
And this is what?
2022.
33 years later.
Yep.
We're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. What we're going to do is we're going to transition to a story that happened this week. Well, a very big story, if not just in Toronto, but I think people should be aware of, period. Especially people who think, oh, Canada's such a safe place and blah, blah, blah. There was a report released this week by the Toronto Police Commission about policing and policing when it came to specific communities, especially Black and Indigenous communities. And surprise, surprise, the police have admitted that when it comes to policing of brown people, Black people, they're not doing a great job. So something that we've known forever and ever. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can, there was a response by a lady named Beverly Bain that I'm going to play. It's about 5 minutes long, but I think it's important that you watch and hear the whole thing. So here we go.
I'm here to address what I see as really egregious in terms of this.
Okay, we may have some buffering issues. Hopefully it'll go through. All right, we're having some technical difficulties bringing you this video. So I'm going to stop it and see if I can open up. But while I'm trying to work on the technical challenges, Elder, what was your response to this report?
Particular,
oh, here we go.
A public relations stunt.
It's buffering too much. I'd rather not play it. So I'm going to come out of it.
That has been delivered.
Okay. So I'm going to try one more time, family. If it doesn't work on this try, we'll just nix it. So I'm going to I really wanted to see if we could share this. So let's give it another try. Okay, let's give it one more go.
This has nothing to do with the Black community. In fact, the Black community never asked for an apology. Not that I think you were apologizing to the Black community. This was the apology.
Okay. You know what? It's not going to happen, folks. So let's just take it down.
Apologizing to your rank and file. 4.
Okay. So, Louis, what's your thought, your feedback on the announcement by the police? Finally, just making this, I'm sorry.
Well, then it was really an apologizing to the community for the level of racism that was evident in police interactions with our community. It was based on race-collected data that the police had collected over the last 2 years. Not data that was provided by the Ontario Human Rights Commission or Black Action Defense Committee or African Legal Action Committee. It was their own data. And after analyzing that data, wow moment. Wow, there's racism in how we've interacted with the Black community. Let me go back a little bit in history, please. 1979, we had a provincial Black Youth Conference at Skadden Court Community Center to address the level of police brutality and racism in our community, against our community. A forum was set up with the Canadian Civil Rights Liberation Group to bring in the police officers, executive, to talk about the number of people dying at the hands of police. I think there were 8 in that year. It was going to be held at OISE, Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. On the day of the forum, the police who had agreed to show up decided to cop out, to not attend, because they said that any discussion, they didn't think it was going to be a public discussion. They thought it was something that they're going to work out and then come up with some agreement as to what they would say. And they said if they were going to discuss it publicly, it might further exacerbate the concerns in the city. And they didn't want to do that. So at the last minute, they pulled out. As I said, they copped out. That was in 1979. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to admit it. And they didn't want to have any public discussion about it. So let's fast forward to 2022, to June, where they said, we apologize to the Black community because the data that we've collected over the last 2 years indicates that we have a problem and racism does exist. So since 1979, no matter who said what report was written, what evidence was provided, it was totally ignored. There was no value to it. And 43 years later, they said, wow, we got a problem. Maybe we should have listened. But in those 43 years, you know how many people have lost their lives to police brutality, to racist police enforcement of law? You know how many families have been destroyed? And they did not think they had a problem, even though people were telling them at every turn that this existed. So when they made the apology, I'm saying, okay, now you're taking ownership. And now you set up some process to manage this. But you need community involvement and community participation. The community has always been there. You just have ignored us. Totally ignored us. Now you're asking for our help. So I'm supposed to look at things positively because I'm too negative at times. So maybe taking ownership, maybe making the apology is a step in the right direction. But I'm thinking of the 43 years. What has happened? What damage? What hurt? What pain? What loss you have been responsible for? How are you going to make these things right? So when Beverly Bain stands up and says, we didn't ask for an apology, we want action. I know Beverly because Beverly was at that Black Youth Conference in 1979. That Black Youth Provincial Conference that we had at Skadden Court. And I'm glad to hear somebody stand up and speak the truth. Not sugarcoating, not pretending that everything is right. So I'm glad that she said what she had to say. And maybe it's a wake-up call, not only for the police, but it's a wake-up call for our community. Because between me and you, sometimes people in our own community didn't believe that this was a problem of racism. Always blaming the youth, always blaming everybody except the racist tendencies that were validated, not by me, not by Beverly, not by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, not by Black Action Defense Committee, but by the police themselves. So maybe a window of opportunity is here now, 43 years later.
All right. So Maine is saying they didn't care about our problem. Accountability must include not only the last 2 years, but at least the last 43 years. Bless Beverly. Maine also says change starts with education. I'm going to try to play this video again. I'm seeing if I can try to get it for another source because I think it's very important that we hear what Beverly had to say. So I'm going to give it one more try, family. Sorry to be a little bit of nuisance, but I think it's really important that you hear what she had to say. So let's try it from this platform. And let's see if we can make it happen this time. So crossing our fingers. We're speaking. We're going to get it done this time. Here we go.
I think this was we're apologizing to your rank and file for a series of information that we have been saying to you for decades that has been happening on the ground. And now you were mandated to actually do your own investigation, your own data collection, your own process internally that actually reveal everything we have been saying in respect to, the everyday violence of your police officers on the streets, the everyday violence of police that has been deployed into Black communities in the city, the everyday violence of and strip searching of women and racialized people at different points in public. This has been going on. I documented that in the 90s, in 1990. I documented that here under Bill Blair, that there was strip searching of women. This, and I'll say to you, Chief Raymer, you talk about it being a painful and a hurtful process to your police officers, but this is insulting to Black people. This is insulting to Indigenous people. This is insulting to racialized people. This is insulting to the homeless, us who are queer and trans, who are, last year, we experienced the attacks on encampment, people in encampment sites. We experienced the brutality. We have been calling for defunding. We have been calling for having that funds be, divested to communities to create sustainable housing, to create sustainable community resources and services by the community to support communities. None of that has happened. What have we witnessed? An escalation in policing budget, a deployment of more police to communities in the form of community policing, which we have already said does not work. In fact, it puts us more at risk. Right? This is not about saving our lives. What we have asked for you to do is to stop brutalizing us, to stop killing us, to stop carding us, to stop continuously stopping us and harassing our children, or Black children, or Black sons, or Black daughters. That's what we have asked for. We have asked for the preservation of our lives. And what we have gotten instead is much more police. Yes, your police officers are responsible for their racism. When you talk about systemic change and you talk about the system, you make it seem as though it's a structure that's somehow a separate entity from that of what is happening on the ground, right? It is not a separate, you're culpable, you're implicated, right? Your police officers are doing the job. They are the foot soldiers. They're the ones you deploy on the ground. They're the ones who we interface with, and they're the ones who put our lives at risk. So to say that this isn't about them, and to say that this isn't about their practice, and that they cannot be held accountable and culpable, and that the policies that you have in place to hold police accountable internally is not actually sufficient, because it's not accountable to us.
Excuse me, can we give the...
So it's really critical that you hear what I'm saying and that you understand. I'm sorry, I need to go on, please. This is an apology to Black people, right? And you're interrupting me? No. So it's really significant that you understand. You have not tell us how you're going to stop the violence against us. You have not told us how you're going to stop the killing of our people. You've not said how we can be sure that we can walk the street safely and not being stopped. You have not said anything about that. In fact, what we have witnessed is what is going to continue. So I have one last thing to say. This is the performance of a patriarch, the performance of a heteropatriarchal institution and a bunch of heteropatriarchs who are saying to you, I have been beating you and killing you for decades, and I'm sorry, but I am not going to stop, right? And you're going to still, and you're going to still continue to forgive me. This is my way of saying you're going to forgive me, and you're going to allow me to continue to do what I need to do, right? But I am not going to stop being and doing what I have been doing. So, Chief Raymer, we do not accept your apology.
Thank you. Chief, you may respond.
Yeah, I wanted to comment and just simply say that I realize it's a very difficult and important day. And we are making concerted efforts to move forward in a productive way. When we talk about the membership and, we talk about systemic racism, I use examples like the TAVIS program. I use examples like the way we were doing strip searches. These were all things that were mandated by the organization and not by individual members. And they have now, take steps to correct them. And this is how we're trying to eliminate all forms of systemic racism. And so that we become a better organization. And that's what makes this important. And as I indicated, there are 38 action items that we are going to do moving forward, like our anti-Black racism and Indigenous experience training, the mandating of a review of body-worn cameras for all use of force incidents. These are a couple of the 38 action items that have been developed in consultation with our community advisory panel. And these are all efforts to help us do this better and to eliminate the systemic racism that is creating some of these problems.
Elder, your thoughts and comments.
Well, I think Beverly Bain, I thank her for her courage to speak up. Because normally when you have these press conferences, you can almost predict what the questions are going to be. And you can almost predict what the answers are going to be. It seems as though they sit down and they discuss in advance. This came out of left field and they were not prepared, clearly. The softball questions that you normally get from the media, that didn't happen here, right? So I'm thankful for Beverly for getting out down and challenging what was happening. But also at the same time, for 43 years, we have an opportunity now. They've taken ownership of this. They've committed to do some things about it. They've spoken about the 38 action items. They've talking about tracking and reporting, about rebuilding trust, transparency. They're talking about real and durable change. Unfortunately, I don't have another 43 years on my clock to see this materialize. So we're just going to have to continue to put more pressure and make a difference. Toronto's an incredible city, resourceful, internationally acclaimed, always ranked in the top 10 in international surveys. But I ask the question, which part of the city are you living in?
Which Toronto?
Which Toronto, and what's the color of your skin? Because the results will be different. So here's an opportunity. They've set up advisory committees with the community. I've seen on the streets police officers going outside of their normal role to work in community. This change is not going to happen overnight because this is a change of culture, not an individual. It's a culture of racism or the tolerance for racism. Now that ownership of this, they've called it out. Let's start monitoring to see if there's any real impact and durable impact, because our kids should feel safe. I had a meeting with some young people 2 weeks ago. I was asking them about what's their biggest fear in their community. And I thought they were going to say, drugs or criminal activity, right, and stuff like that. And 1 out of 3 said, the police. The police. The police that we entrust to serve and protect. I was doing the total opposite in terms of instilling fear and despair. So it's not a surprise to us about the problem. It's not a surprise. So we have work to do. We have to hold their feet to the fire now. And we have to ensure that things change.
So I just want to ask, and you and I always talk about we have work to do. That's the work that they have to do in your mind. What is the work that we have to do?
No, we have to hold them accountable.
Anything more than that?
We have to hold them accountable. We have to continue advocating and demanding, but we also have to build our own resilience.
Okay, that's where I was wanting you to go.
Yeah, we have to build our own programs. The first word in community safety is community. It's not police and it's not politicians. So if we want to be safe in our community, we have to start acting like community. So we have to break out of that individual self-serving bubble about survival and realize that we win together or we lose together.
Good point. I just want to catch up. There were some previous comments made about when you were sharing about the family. Macmillan Group saying the solution is fathers have to assume their roles and dominance. Too many are absent. The support systems offered to, quote, single, unquote, mothers give them a sense of, quote, independence, unquote, that is destructive. Maine says our organization is reintroducing the idea of rebuilding the relationships with our children that have been poisoned with institutional teachings. I've taken back the education of my children by teaching them the essential survival, life skills, and family foundations. Maine has a question. I believe our communities need to take the lead here and start to be resourceful. What can I do as an organization to be a vessel as accountability has to be taken?
Okay, we all know the history of Africa, how they got together in Berlin, Germany, and they cut it up, and they all got a little piece. That was their whole approach, divide and conquer. And fast forward today, that practice is still there. The organizations that exist out there, sometimes they work against each other. They're not able to organize, collaborate, and speak as one. There's something that we call the funding Olympics, where when funding money is put on the table, we know who's going to get the gold, the silver, and the bronze based on history and size and comfort. And then the leftover money, people are left competing amongst themselves for. But in order to compete for that funding, they have to undermine other organizations, work in isolation, work in silos, and so on. So from an organizational point of view, I think the organizations need to do a better job of realizing their game plan, but then also developing our own game plan, which is about solidarity, working together. We don't have to agree on everything, but instead of taking on these systems individually as one organization, let's join together as a collective. And on certain issues where there's common ground, let's fight in a unified way and stop fighting against each other. I'm from the corporate world. So best practices was shared amongst the different departments. So there was a corporate benefit. The departments were not allowed to fight against each other or hoard information that benefited their department at the expense of others. The culture was set up the way we had to share, we had to work together. That's what we need to do as a community right now. We have to find common ground where we can work together, leave the egos behind, leave the
Yep.
internal bickering and fighting behind. Uh, let's support each other because some organizations they might not have the skill set or the experience. Some will adopt an organization, right, and work with them so that they can develop. Don't cast them aside. Don't throw stones at each other. Let's find a common ground. Let's work together so we can have that collective impact that is necessary to take on the institutions and the structures that have done no good to our community.
I always say that this is a system. So in order to beat a system or defeat a system, you have to have a system.
It's not rocket science, Dr.
Yeah.
Vile.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. Like in time in our history where we've been able to make progress, we've worked together. And right now, I think we're in one of those transition stages where we haven't done that at the best that we can. So we have to start building relationships with our community organizations, helping those that are struggling instead of casting them aside and realizing that the funding Olympics is about divide and conquer and it's not serving our community's best interest. And I go back to self-determination, self-reliance. We have to find ways to sustain ourselves and not be dependent on government because government has their own agenda and it's seldom the same agenda as our community.
Good. Some good final words. Some more comments here. Macmillan Group, to put this apology in perspective, sorry, you should listen to the comments that the head of the police union made after it was delivered. Yes, that's another conversation itself too. And then Maine Campbell saying, thank you for this space of truth. Hayden Morrison says, one suggestion of something we can do if to find someone else to fight together. Let's start with building partnerships for the fight. Yeah, you have to, the partnerships and relationships, collaboration. That's the only way it's going to happen. Those who do not support, have collaborative partners. Learn.
I want to just make a point. There are incredible people out there doing incredible work.
Yep.
This is not all about doom and gloom. We'd be in a worse situation if some of these people and these organizations were not doing what they're doing. I think that we have to recognize this effort and build on it because I swear, if these people were not doing the work that they're doing right now, we'd be in a worse situation. So we're holding ground.
Facts.
We might be losing ground in some places, but it would have been a lot more worse if a lot of these incredible people are not doing the work that they're doing.
The heroes you don't see.
Exactly.
It's, and it's those are the people that are keeping it going. The heroes you don't, and they know when they get up every morning who they're fighting for. They know that every morning who they're fighting for.
And a good strategy, we have to be very generous with our praise because our people are struggling. Even when they do the right thing, they're under attack. So let's be generous with our praise and the recognition of these people because they also need some encouragement. As Randall and Mark would say, we need to give them their flowers today, right? Let's be generous. When people are doing good things, let's say thank you and let's encourage them because they themselves are going through some internal battles, organizational battles. So let's be generous with our praise and our recognition for those people that are actually making a difference because that recognition and that praise is not going to come from a system that is bent on their failure.
Wonderful. Marlon Stevens says, good morning. Marlon, we're at the tail end, so you're going to have to watch the replay, but it was good catching you yesterday at the event. Tim Frey, great conversation, gentlemen. Have a great Father's Day weekend. One love. Absolutely. If you want to get in contact with the Zero Gun Violence movement, the information is there. Website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Fantastic. Always conversation, Elder. Thank you for everything you and your community. I don't like using that word, but you have a true community. What you have done is a true community in mine. What you have done, are doing, and will be doing. Have a great Father's Day weekend. I know not only your father to your own family, but I know there's a number of people out there, including myself, that regard you as a father. So blessings to you.
And thank you for the work that you're doing with the Dr. Vibe show. I know that seldom will you get recognized, but at the beginning of the show, you did mention a couple of awards that have recognized you. You need to continue doing this, and you need to multiply it.
It's in the works, and keep on pushing me. I know I call you doctor, then you can keep on pushing me with that stuff. So keep on. You can stretch me back, because you're always looking for a return when I say doctor. So that's your way of pushing back on me.
So we're all in this together, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to use your platform and your program to talk about some of these issues that people seldom want to talk about.
Well, it's our program, and quick question here by Mr. Marsh: are any members of law enforcement involved in your movement?
So when we started Zero Gun Violence movement, we had two things, guiding principles. One was we don't take government funding, and one was we do not work with the police, because many of the people that we work with have had problems with the police, and we had to build trust with them. So we stayed at arm's length with the police, and we stayed self-funding, self-sufficient, and self-reliant. Over the last couple of years, the police have reached out to us to help them with their training, to give them some insights as to how to work with the kids on the street and so on. And we've responded in a positive way. It's not something that we're going to fully embrace, but we take it because of the history of the people, of our experience with the police, but also the people that we work with. So we're very mindful, but at the same time, if the police are reaching out and trying to sincerely make a difference, we find ways to work with them. In fact, we have an appointment with them to come to their recruiting session, not recruiting, their graduation, to speak to some of their officers. And we've accepted that invitation. So we will show up and see if we can make a difference there. Things have to change, but things have to change on both sides of the equation for the results that we need at this particular time.
Oh, congratulations! That is to me, that's a big win.
Look, we started off as a 90-day summer campaign.
Exactly.
We've learned a lot over these last 9 years, and we have to change. At one time, we wouldn't even speak to the media because we didn't trust them to say the right thing. But we've changed that, and we do now speak to the media, not only the local media, the national media, and international media.
Exactly.
Because I think what we're doing and how we do it and what we're seeing is different from what you're going to hear from the police and the politicians. The police can't tell you the truth. They cannot, because everything's under investigation. The politicians can't tell you the truth because everything is politically motivated. Zero Gun Violence movement, you have a better chance of getting the full story from us because of the way we operate.
Wonderful. And Ray says, understood why you don't work closer with the police. He gets it. And Maine Campbell says, wow, great start. All right, there's the contact information. Please reach out. Please support whatever way you can. Dr. Marsh, have a good weekend. Okay.
Oh boy, one of these days
I know.
Thank you very much again. Thank you very much. I know that you do this with good intentions and stuff. We have to do this. We have a vested interest in the success of the work that you do, because
Thank
you
you.
do provide a platform to have discussions on topics that people seldom want to talk about or hear. And your consistency over these years is a great indicator that you're passionate about this work. So thank you very much
Well,
for providing us the opportunity.
my honor and pleasure. It all started with a laptop, a microphone, and a dream, and a dining room table. And that's where it is. So we just keep on doing on. Keep
Thank
on.
you so much.
And I will say one last closing comment. There are times when myself and this wonderful elder at an event, and I always ask him, "Do you need a lift home?" Because he does most of his traveling by transit. And some of the great moments I've had in my journey is our conversations on that drive home. They're deep, they're meaningful, they're passionate. It re-energizes me. And those are some of the special moments as a Black man that I get to experience with this great elder. So I want to bless you for doing that. And I want to drive home, yes, to get you home, but I just it's so good to just be in your presence. You make me better.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And what you're seeing in front of you is the work of so many other people that keep
Same
me
here.
on my game plan and make sure that I don't slip. So
All
thank,
right.
thank those people around me that ensure that I don't get sidetracked.
Take care. Be well. Keep the faith. Make sure you give yourself grace, my brother.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for this opportunity.
My honor. All right, everyone. Epic conversation today. Louis March, Zero Gun Violence Movement. If you want to catch replays of this epic conversation called The Morning Vibe, you can go to my website, the drvibeshow.com. You can go to my Facebook page. You can go to my YouTube page. You can also catch replays at the Ryan Oneil Knight, YouTube page. So it is Father's Day weekend. Want to say happy Father's Day if you're watching this live or hopefully on the replay before Father's Day. We will be back on Monday. Hopefully Ryan will get some rest from his 3-day conference. And also want to plug it, the Dad Central Show. There is the link now. It is officially launched. First interview with a gentleman named Trevor Linden, former NHL player, is right today, June 17th. There's the link. Subscribe, give me feedback. Then on Monday, June 20th, we have a conversation with Donovan Bennett, wonderful Black father who is a broadcaster on the Sportsnet platform. Sportsnet is one of Canada's 2 national Sportsnet channels. So as we sign off, we say, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can think it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace. And don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And here's another one. I'll leave you to think on this one. A tree without roots is a piece of wood. We'll see you on Monday, everybody. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. Walk good.